Story 1. Am I the a-hole for walking around my house naked? My girlfriend works mornings, so I have the house to myself. And what do I like to do? Walk around naked. My girlfriend and I are the only two people who have the keys to the house, but she has a habit of lending her key out to her friends. I don't have a problem with that. My only problem is that she doesn't tell me when she does it. So one morning, I'm walking around naked, and I hear somebody open the door, and I think it's my girlfriend home early. But instead, I see one of her friends, and I ran to the bedroom and threw some clothes on. We had a laugh about it, but my girlfriend got ticked when the friend told her and joked that I had a nice butt. My girlfriend snapped at me later and told me to stop walking around naked. And I told her to tell me if she lent the key out to anybody, so at least I can expect it and put some clothes on before they came. We agreed. I kept walking around the house naked because, it's my house, and I have the whole place to myself. Guess what happened? The door opened one day, and her friend, the same one, came in. So yeah, my girlfriend is ticked and says that I'm the a-hole. But if she would have told me she had lent the key out again, her friend wouldn't have seen me naked. Again. Yeah, exactly. You two talked about it. You like walking around naked, and she doesn't give you a heads up when she lends out the key, and she agreed to let you know when she lends the key out again. And this is her fault. It's your house. You like to do what you like to do. And why is she lending her key out to strangers anyway? I mean, well, not strangers. This is her best friend. But you never know what other people. If I had a house, I'm lending the key out to nobody. If someone has a key to my house, they're paying me rent. Story 2. Stepmom asks about my tattoo, then makes it about herself. Necessary background. I, 35 female, lost my biological mom to drowning when I was 5. My dad raised me and my sister solo for years, but remarried when I was 12 or 13. Stepmom, now 58, was verbally abusive, jealous of my relationship with my dad, and jealous of my closeness with any family members on my mom or my dad's side. She also hated that I refused to let her adopt me. I just never saw her as a true mom. I didn't think she liked me. She scared me more than making me feel safe or happy, and she showed blatant favoritism to her bio son because he could just run to his dad if he doesn't like it. You're stuck here. Anyway, my dad passed away of lung cancer in 2010. I stayed in touch with my stepmom because I genuinely love my stepbrother and his wife and kids. I'm very low contact. My sister is no contact with stepmom. I held off seeing her for years by using COVID, but finally ran out of excuses and she came to visit after Christmas for a long weekend. As she had not seen me in person in a few years, she noticed the new tattoo I had. It's 3 simple line drawings, one of a tree, one of crystals, and one of a robot. She asked what they meant, and I said, well, the tree is for my mom, since one of the few memories I have of her is when she taught me to climb a tree in our yard. The crystals are for Dad, because he was a geophysicist and a rock collector and loved to dig for quartz crystals in Arkansas. And the robot is for my nephew, my cousin's son, who passed away when he was 6. He had drawn me the robot one of the last times I saw him. She paused and sat back, and then responded, so, deity forbid, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, what would you get for me? I was so hurt, but also not surprised. She's made comments before to the tune of, do I have to pass away to get you to appreciate me? So it wasn't totally out of the blue. But it made me so mad that there was absolutely no empathy, no compassion. It was all, well, what about me? Don't I deserve a memorial? Ugh. You have to wonder what lack of self-reflection she has when she showed the reason as showing favoritism to the son is, well, he can always run off to Dad. The mother admits she's kind of difficult to get along with. And something that personal, oh my goodness, and just demanding to be a part of it. No! Just awful. Story 3. I left a dirt stain on a man's white Nikes because he wouldn't move his feet on a flight. I was flying home from a work trip on AA. Now, on this flight, a man sat next to me. He wasn't super tall, about average in height. He needed to go to the bathroom, so I got up, let him out, and got up again to let him in. As I sat back down, my leg hit him. I looked down to see his leg about halfway into my aisle, leaving me with about a third of the space I had. I'm thinking he's going to move, but he's got plenty of space because he doesn't have a bag under his seat, but keeps it there. I'm sitting on the side saddle in my seat at this point. I look at him, then at his leg, then back at him. He blatantly stares at me, then pulls out his phone and just starts playing on it. So what I do is lift my foot and place it over his foot, setting the dirty sole of my Converse on what looks like his new white Nikes. Fabric ones, too, not leather. He immediately whips his head up at me, and I, following his example, pulled out my tablet and started reading. He pulled his foot away and had a nasty attitude the whole plane ride. But I got my space back. Yeah, well, at least you got everything resolved by yourself. This is one of those things where it just seems to be the trend now of just inconveniencing everyone on a flight because someone themselves seems inconvenienced. But yeah, really, you have to leave space for everybody, especially depending on where you sit, how crowded everything gets. There's not that much room. Story 4. Am I the a-hole for making my oldest pay back a $3,000 dress she ruined? My oldest, Bethany, 16, has a step-sibling, Maria, 14, almost 15. Bethany and I are white, while my husband and Maria are of Mexican descent. They have been in each other's lives since they were 6 and 7, and overall the relationship is good. Until recently. Maria's quinceañera is coming up, and my husband and his ex-wife took her to get her dress. The dress and alterations came to around $3,000. My daughter has been very jealous of the whole party. I've informed her it's part of the culture, just like when she had a huge Sweet 16 party with her friends. I spent more time with her to try to make her feel better about it and got her own much cheaper dress for the party. The party is supposed to be in 2 weeks, but my daughter, after an argument with Maria about the TV, scribbled all over the expensive dress and ripped the back. The short story was that everyone was ticked. I gave money to my husband and his ex to try and get a new dress ASAP. I informed my daughter she will need to get a job and pay back the full price of the dress as punishment. We got into a huge argument over it, and the whole situation isn't fair. I am choosing Maria and being a huge jerk. Am I being a huge jerk? No. Like you said, you gave her a Sweet 16 party. She had her big celebration. And this is a very big thing for Maria, the quinceañera. And you tried explaining it to her. And she just decides to revert back to being a child instead of a young adult. No, she needs to learn responsibility for her actions. That's not being a jerk. Story 5. Get your manager here so we can talk about your manners. Have fun looking for a new job. My company takes safety very seriously, to the point we have safety briefings on the regular to keep us updated. Yesterday, we had a talk on compactor safety. One of the big rules is to never, ever, under any circumstances, climb into a compactor unless it's unhooked from any power sources. Sounds like common sense, right? Well, dear reader, As you're about to learn, apparently, common sense isn't that common. After getting our briefing, we get our assignments and are sent on our merry way. I go to my area, clean it, and pull trash. As I'm walking to the compactor, what do I see sticking out of it but two trousered legs? After the shock lasting a nanosecond wore off, I started yelling, "What are you doing, you idiot? Don't go crawling around in there." I know I shouldn't have yelled, but I was so mad. Well, Mr. Idiot fell out and started yelling at me. "Don't you go yelling at me! Where is your manager? Get them here right now." Malicious compliance mode activated. I put on my sweetest smile and say, "Of course. I'm so sorry. Let me get my manager here." Mr. Idiot smirks and is like, "Good girl." So I called my manager over and asked her to come over. Meanwhile, Mr. Idiot is smiling like the cat who got the cream. I'm fighting to keep from smiling, because my manager, Miss Heroin, takes safety as seriously as I do. I've seen her reduce full-grown men to tears over safety issues. Ms. Heroin shows up, and Mr. Idiot says, "You should train your workers not to yell." Miss Heroin turns to me, "And why were you yelling at him?" "Because I caught him climbing into the compactor, and I got scared he'd be crushed." In a nanosecond, Mr. Idiot goes from looking like a contented cat to looking like a scolded dog. After a sound verbal thrashing, Miss Heroin calls Mr. Idiot's manager, and within 30 minutes, Mr. Idiot was clearing out his desk, still smelling of garbage. Why were you in the compactor in the first place? Why? And you attended those meetings. Do you think you're invulnerable? Well, you lost your job, so now you know you're not. But really, I thought this was going to be something where the manager was this girl's mother or something like that. But no, just someone who takes safety that seriously and has the power of persuasion in her voice, making someone listen. So yeah, good luck finding a new job. Story 6. In my 35 years of being in sales and sales management, that was by far the most interesting performance review I have ever witnessed. I know this is long, but I assure you this is a juicy one. I was working with a B2B sales company. We sold services to companies, basically. And this company had managed to hire the most incompetent, lazy, and jealous sales manager I have ever come across. We were a team of 5 salespeople and a sales manager. All 5 of us hated our sales manager for various reasons, but we liked her personally. I was the top salesperson on the team. I was sitting at 170% of my yearly objective and was well on my way to the President's Club. This is largely because I was the only salesperson on the team with real sales experience, and the sales manager was too incompetent to train a team. So my VP came down for our yearly performance reviews, and I was called in first. It was my VP and Mrs. B, short for Shrew. I was expecting a positive performance review. Right off the bat, Mrs. B hits me with, "Sting, you know our location hasn't been performing at objective for a number of years, and we suspect this is because salespeople are misrepresenting their daily work." I'm taken aback. "I don't think you're actually doing what you say you're doing in your CRM. This is something that could get you fired." I looked at Mrs. B and said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah." I hit her back with, "I'm shocked you decided to go this route." Mrs. B, with a confident smile, said, "We gotta do what it takes to get this location on objective." I said, "All right, let's play a game. Mrs. B, pick a day, any day in the CRM, and let me prove to you that I went to all my appointments and did all my stops as recorded." "Well, I'm not saying you never go into the field, I just think some days you stay at home and you put hogwash notes in your CRM. I said, Mrs. B, pick a day, any day. Pick a day you think I lied about my sales activities. So Mrs. B picks a day. Now, I'm smiling from ear to ear, and I am fracking heated right now. I notice the VP is smiling at me, and his head is slanted to one side. I suspected he knew Mrs. B was about to get absolutely fracking owned, and he was right. So she gives me the day, and I turn to the VP. Mr. VP, are you aware of how Android phones work? VP responds, enlighten me. I said, by default, Android has location services turned on, and in fact, Google will track where you went and when. Naturally, I carry my phone everywhere, so let's compare what Google says I did that day to what my CRM says. So I pull up my Google location services for that day, and surprise, surprise, it's a match. Mrs. B is obviously very concerned at this point. I said, I'm actually quite enjoying this performance review. Let's pick another day, Mrs. B. Mrs. B fires back, we don't need to do that. I turn to the VP. Mr. VP, would you mind picking a day? He says, sure, what about XYZ? He pulls up my CRM. I pull my location services for that day. Guess what? It's a match. I then get ready to pull out the big guns. Mr. VP, do you remember company XYZ with a contract value of excess of $1 million that we lost recently? Yes, I remember. Apparently, our competitor won them over on price. We can't win them all. Mr. VP, here is an email from the VP basically stating that they've decided not to go with us for our failure to provide 3 samples for them to decide on which product worked best for them. Can you forward that to me? Sure, not a problem, Mr. VP. Forward it over. Mr. VP, while I'm at this, let me forward you over several email chains before this where I clearly asked Mrs. B to order those samples. In fact, in those very same email chains, she confirmed that they had in fact ordered the sample. He asked me to forward those emails to him, so I did. Now, Mr. VP, I had our service department look to see if any orders had been placed for those samples. No orders were actually placed. He said, I'm going to look into this. Mrs. B is fracking, sweating, mother-fracking bullets at this point. My performance review has just turned into her performance review, and it's not going right. Mr. VP, I have one more thing I'd like to bring to your attention. Do you mind if I step outside for a minute so I can show you? He said, sure, I need to have a talk with Mrs. B anyway. Now, I need to mention that several years prior to this, a general manager at another location intimately violated a woman. The company was sued and lost a lot of money because of this. Since the incident, the company put in a very clear-cut policy: no intimate relations between management and people who work with them or for them. It's immediate termination for the manager. Now, another sales consultant in the office was named Joe. Joe was a married man with 2 beautiful kids, and Mrs. B had the hots for him. She tried to be intimate with him multiple times, twice on text. Joe and I had talked about if he should report this transgression. I walked into the sales office and said, Joe, I think it's time we get a new sales manager. You got those texts? He looks at me and goes, is today going to be the day? I said, today is going to be the day. All the sales staff knew what was going on. The mood in the office was lifted. Joe and I began walking back to the conference room when the location manager, who was not a part of the performance review, saw Joe and I. He asked, what's going on? And Joe said, you're going to need to hire a new sales manager soon. The location manager was confused. He said he's coming into the meeting. We said, fine. I knocked on the door. Mr. VP said, come on in, so I did. There we stood, Joe, myself, and the location manager. Mrs. B knew exactly what was about to happen. We all took our seats, and I asked the VP, Mr. VP, I just want to clarify a company policy. Well, sure. Is it true that if a manager tries to engage in an intimate relationship with a direct report, that it's immediate termination for that manager? Mr. VP sits up straight, takes a moment, and goes, yes, if something like that came to my attention, my hands would be tied. I'd have to fire the manager. I said, well, Joe has something for you that he wants to show you. Mrs. B got up and walked out of the conference room. She was about to cry, you could tell. Her world, her career, had just completely wrecked, and I don't think she wanted to be around for the end. Joe went on to tell the VP how he's a happily married man with 2 beautiful kids, and Mrs. B kept hitting on him. In fact, she had sent him numerous intimate texts, and on 2 occasions openly invited him to come be intimate with her. Once in the office and one at his home, even after he made it clear he was not going to be intimate with her. Mr. VP asked to see the texts, and Joe provided them. The VP asked him to screenshot those and email them over. Joe said he would. Then the VP said, I'm going to need both of you to go back to the sales office. The location manager and I have some talking to do. We walked back into the sales office. I noticed the sales manager's office had looked cleaned out. Apparently, Mrs. B was bawling. She was a wreck and crying, and said she was going home. Joe laughed and said, yeah, she won't be coming back. It was about 20 to 25 minutes when the VP came into the sales office and asked me to come into the conference room again. So I did. I sat down, and the VP said, well, I would like to inform you that Mrs. B has been terminated effective immediately. With that being said, after your performance review and looking over your numbers, you are our top sales rep in this location and deserve nothing short of stellar remarks on your review, and you'll be getting that. I said, thank you. I do have one question. He said, yeah, sure, anything. How do I apply for the new sales manager job that just opened up? Mr. VP laughed and said, you sure like to strike while the iron's hot, don't you? I said, I do. He said he would let the location manager know, and I'd be able to put in my application. I thanked him, and he said, no, thank you. In my 35 years of being in sales and sales management, that was by far the most interesting performance review I have ever witnessed. I did not end up getting promoted. I ended up quitting shortly after this because they decided not to promote me and instead hired a guy with no sales experience to be our sales manager. And this rubbed me the wrong way. Also, our service department sucked and couldn't deliver on what I was selling, and another company offered me more money. Oh, what a bummer of an ending. I mean, that VP really should have hired him. I mean, he was there. He proved that he could be that he had the skills and he had the ability to do this job. And why did they hire someone with no experience? Were they really just trying to save money? But, yeah, know what you're worth. Keep track of everything. It's the same thing with a lot of these work stories. Document everything. Your work family is not your family or your friends, especially when they act like this.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 7. I just realized I'm jealous of my 6-year-old. I woke up this morning and found my 6-year-old on the sofa, fully dressed and ready for school, an hour before he was supposed to be up. I ask, "Hey, buddy, what are you doing so early?" He replies, "I accidentally peed the bed this morning around like 4, and I tried to wake you up, but couldn't, so I took my blankets off, put them by the laundry room and changed. Then I came out here. I thanked him for taking care of it, and I told him not to worry. We'll have everything cleaned and ready for his bed later. Next time, make sure you pee before bed. Accidents happen, blah, 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 etc. Then he got up and got breakfast. I made coffee, and I sat there and thought to myself, I'm jealous of this kid. It then reminded me of being around his age as a child, and I remember wetting the bed. But my first instinct wasn't to wake my parents. Hell no. They would have beat the hell out of me. I instead went to the bathroom, stole a roll of toilet paper, and tried to dry my pee-drenched linen, because I knew if my parents found out, I would be in so much trouble, and I was terrified of them. My son doesn't have to live with that kind of fear. Instead, he tried to get me, and when I didn't wake up, he took care of it himself. And I wish I felt that sense of safety and reassurance when I was his age. And really, just self-motivation at that age, that's really great. He knew what to do. I think the father must have explained what happened if he had peed the bed. The kid was very self-sufficient. This is going to really serve him well. And plus, has very loving and supportive parent, at least one parent. Amazing. What do you think?
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.